I am talking to Rob Liebow, the Superintendent of Rockport Schools. Good morning, Rob. How are you?
Hey, Heather, not bad.
Good. I want to start right out with what sort of grade you would give remote learning at this point.
Remote learning in general, or how we're pulling it off?
How you're
The
pulling it
sort of
off.
it.
Yeah.
I think we're pulling it off with A minus,
Oh, good, good. I'm hearing
within the
from,
parameters of what remote learning is, which is not an ideal way to conduct business for kids who have had no experience with it, for teachers who have had no experience with it. For kids that have a difficult time engaging even in regular school, then you put them in a remote format and becomes really challenging. But I think our kids have risen to the occasion. I think our teachers, especially, have really gone above and beyond and embraced remote learning and the aspects that are the most important to it, which is the connectiveness between kids and their adult mentors in terms of their teachers. That's such a huge part of all this, is the connectiveness. And our teachers have done a marvelous job with that, as they always have, but they've extended it to the remote world, and I'm most proud of that.
that's great because I've heard from some teachers that that connectedness is feeling like an emptiness, and also that it's just really hard. It involves a lot more work in terms for the teachers. What do you think?
Oh, it definitely is. It's a whole shift. I mean, even if you've been trained in this, I think it would be difficult. If you're trying to contact a Navy ship at sea and talk strategy or something from Washington, that would be hard as a captain of a Navy ship. You're talking about, connecting with kindergartners, with first graders, and that is just a very, very difficult thing, let alone seniors who have no idea what their graduations are going to look like, their whole plans that they had for how the school year would end up just vaporized in an instant within a 2-day period of time. And that's psychologically just very, very hard to deal with. Not only school people, but I think anybody in general in society right now is having that psychological struggle of, human contact and being able to have a sense of normal. They talk about new normal. I don't think there's such a thing as new normal. There's either normal or there's abnormal. And we're in abnormal right now. But we're doing the best job we can. Our teachers have really risen to the occasion. Our administrators have had tremendous leadership in terms of, pulling this off and supporting their teachers and, really making this go as good as it possibly could.
You
Just
have
trying to get the dog in the cage here.
so it's sounding like you're saying that levels of anxiety, maybe levels of stress, are pretty high. Am I hearing that through the lines of your sentences there?
Yeah, I mean, that's my best educated, feeling about that. It's hard to judge that remotely as well. When you get a kid in your office and you can look them in the eye and feel, their presence and what their situation is, in live time, that's one thing. But when you try to do this, when there's just a screen there and a kid sitting there and you have no idea what's going through their mind or their situation, and they're not necessarily going to share with you, and it's tough. I mean, there's no way to say that this is an easy thing to do, but your original question, or how are we pulling it off? I think we're pulling it off, given the situation, the best we possibly can, and an A minus is a pretty good grade for me, I think.
I've been reading that in some school systems, there's a concern about kids just getting left behind. Literally, they're lost in the system. Do you have any worries about that in the Rockport schools?
Oh yeah, I mean, that it would be wrong to say we didn't have a worry about that. The fall, if we get back to a normal, which is a whole nother question, is going to be a huge time of catch up for a lot of kids. And how we pull that off will be a really interesting exercise.
Have you
Especially
started,
given the, what's that?
have you started to think about that
Oh,
transition?
yeah. And I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about it. We formed a committee to look at what school opening may look like. It's dependent on both CDC guidelines as well as guidelines from the state. They have a working committee. They have not issued those guidelines yet. Even Governor Baker's opening plan that detailed everything down as far as a bar did not say what the plan would be for schools. So if you read the CDC guidelines, which they were released a weekend or so ago, and I'm sure the state will, springboard off of those kind of guidelines, are pretty daunting challenges in terms of how you pull off school. Buses that they suggest have a 6 foot, separation between all the riders, that they have their temperature taken before they get on the bus. Well, who does that? Is it a parent? Is it the bus monitor? That you do have a bus monitor, but what's that do? And then one kid per seat, every other seat. And that means a bus that might hold 62 kids is going to hold 8 kids, 9 kids. How do you do that? I mean, our situation's probably, maybe we can pull it off, but how do you do it in Gloucester? How do you do it in Beverly? How do you do it in Boston? That's a huge challenge. And then they say, well, you want to shut down your big gathering spaces so that if you have, cafeterias, they should be shut down and you should be serving lunch in classrooms. Well, that's fine, except for the custodial piece of that, except for who monitors that, who delivers the lunches, who's on duty. Teachers have a contractual lunchtime that's free for themselves, as they should have. Mm-hmm. So where do you get 42 lunch monitors for all the classroom spaces? Bathrooms that, their recommendation in the CDC should be cleaned every half an hour. Well, that's fine. But if you have one custodian on and you're telling them that there's 8 bathrooms in the school and every half hour thou shalt be cleaning the bathrooms, that's not going to happen with one custodian. And what is that? How does that occur? Is it volunteers? Is it superintendents? Is it principals? I don't know how you do that. And again, our school, probably a little easier than trying to pull that off in Gloucester High School or in, Chelsea or someplace that with massive buildings and 1,500 kids in a building. We're talking about a high school building with 290 kids in it, 280 kids in it. But they may say, well, you're going to stagger your schedules. Your desks have to be 6 feet apart in all the classrooms. Well, you think about your typical classroom. I'm sitting here, you're right in front of me so I can, flick your hair or poke your head or whatever. There's somebody right behind me. That can't happen. You got to make it 6 feet apart that way. And then the kid you pass a note to in the next row has to be 6 feet away. So you have to make a paper airplane into it and fly it to them. So a classroom of 20, figure out where you put the desks. Maybe you can put 10 in there and get them 6 feet apart. Can't have tables, they say in the CDC guidelines, because you can't be face to face. You could be on one side of the table, but you can't sit and do a cooperative learning project like you normally would, where we're sitting face to face and talking 3 feet away. That's off the table. How do you do an art room? How do you do a chemistry lab? How do you do a biology lab where you and your teammate are going to dissect a frog? Oh, no, there's going to be 6 foot separation between the frog and the 2 autopsy people. I mean, it's just, how do you do that? I mean, it's probably simple to say, this is how you do it at Shop and Save. Right. You know what I mean? You line up outside, you let them in, and then you go down one row and you go up the next row and you stay apart from each other by the cereal boxes. Well, that's fine, but how do you do that in a school when the bell rings and you have 2 minutes to get to class and get to your locker, but you can't get to your locker because you got to be 6 feet apart at your locker? So I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but I think we need to open school somehow.
For managing all this to the remote learning, to staying remote?
Well, I mean, if it's remote, obviously it's not an issue, but we'll have to plan for it remotely. Mm-hmm. We have a 22-person committee that'll sit on a screen like this, and we'll have a topic for the committee, of, okay, what kind of medical supplies do we need? How many masks? How many gloves? How many sanitation hand washing stations? One of the comments I saw from a member of that committee for the state was that the kids should be washing their hands every half an hour. So he'd figured, well, okay, elementary classroom, washing their hands, before recess or after, that's one thing. But every half hour, you line up the 30 kids and you get to the sink or to the hand sanitizer. And now you've taken 15 minutes to do a hand washing exercise times every half hour. Logistically, how does that work? Even in a perfect world where, you have multiple hand washing stations, then you've got a budget crunch. We have no town meeting coming right now. The possibility of we're operating on the same budget we had last year.
Right. Do you want to talk about that? That this school
Not really, but I will.
and just lay it out. The school committee withdrew the
The school committee pulled the override request, which is one thing, and then the town is, having a difficult time figuring out how you pull off a town meeting with all those things we're talking about, bathrooms and separation and lots of old folks that have the right to vote and deserve to be able to give their input, who are the highest risk category of people. How do you pull together three or 400 people? Can't go in the gymnasium. You can't do it outside. Could you do it virtually? They're investigating that, but how do you vote? If you don't have a computer, how do you get your say on something that you want to have to vote on? And is it your phone and you push 2 if you want to say no and 1 if you want to say yes? I guess, but what if there's 15 people that want to talk on an article? You're going to sit on the Zoom I remember one of the town meetings here started at 8 in the morning, and I think it was 6 or 7 o'clock at night before it was done. Some towns, they adjourn and they have it the next day or the next evening for another 3 or 4 hours. Now, maybe they could trim it down to just the budget articles and some of the other stuff comes later, but even then, there's some interesting stuff about the budget articles if you've got reduced revenues and things have to be cut. And so it's a really tough thing. And then you're supposed to get all these extra medical supplies and extra custodial supplies. And well, where does that come from when your supply budget is barely enough to get your own supplies in the beginning? And then you're told, well, you need 5,000 masks. And, the mask salesmen aren't stupid, right? They're not saying, oh, we're going to cut our mask prices in half. If anything, they're maybe not price gouging, but they're working the envelope. They're in business. We get constant emails about, hey, we've got these PPE supplies for you, and this list of all these things that they've got. If you go to them, they're back ordered. I'm sorry, you can't get them. We were supposed to get one of those sanitizing machines that you spray the buildings down with that we borrowed initially from another school system. They had the machine, but no material to put in it. We had the material, so we said, you give us the machine, we'll use our material. When we're done with the machine, we'll give you the material and you can have your machine back. So we cleaned our whole buildings. Well, we ordered a machine in March and it still hasn't arrived yet. So it would be the same thing with everybody wanting N95 masks. A kid wearing a mask in 2nd grade or 1st grade all day long, and then it's dirty, and can you expect the parent to supply the mask, and the kid must come to school with the mask? What about teachers that are over 65 years old that have health conditions? They're in a risk group. Are they either going to be required to come to school, want to come to school? I would guess they'll have a waiver to not have to come. So maybe it's their remote. My math teacher's on the screen, we're in the building, and you're the aide who comes in to sort of ride herd on us while the teacher teaches remotely through the screen.
Right.
You know.
I just want to review, you will not be able to ask for this extra $900,000 to operate next year, which was part of the override. That is off the table. And now there are what sounds like enormous costs to running the school system next year. Where do you begin with that? Where does the town begin with that?
Well, I mean, we're hopeful that the feds will come through with another, I don't know what the word they use is, bailout package is the right word, that will help schools through some of their challenges. The CARES Act did some of that initially, and then they had another $1 trillion or something they were going to put out, but now it's a political football between the Democrats and the Republicans. Well, there's people out there waiting for that stuff who are not in a good situation, like schools.
You
You
received
know,
funding from the initial CARES Act, the school systems did?
yeah, we got $86,000.
That doesn't seem like that much.
Because it's dependent on your Title I funding,
Yeah.
and we're a Title I district, but there's a spreadsheet you probably can get off the website that shows the varying amounts. I don't remember what Gloucester's was, but for some reason I thought it was like 400,000.
Mhm.
But they're a bigger enrollment,
Right.
so our enrollment isn't very big. The needs are still there. $86,000. I mean, we're using it to try to protect staff and protect salaries right now,
Mhm.
so that we don't have to lay off people and cut people. You could use it for cleaning supplies and whatever, and that would buy a lot of those, but we're trying to keep our staff whole as well, because
Mhm.
our kids are going to need more than ever. They're going to need the adults in the classroom. They're going to need health professionals. They're going to need the counselors. We're in pretty good shape with counselors, but they're going to be right out straight, let
Mm.
alone the kids that are behind. And you've got special ed needs and emotional needs, and who knows, the kids who may not be able to handle school, that maybe have to go to an out of district placement that you'd never planned on, because of what this is not only done to them academically, but done to them socially and emotionally. And maybe they were on this side of the curve, holding it so that they were able to operate and be able to function properly as they should in regular school. Or
Mhm.
maybe this pushes them over that line, and now you're going to meet their needs.
Right.
And every time an out of district placement happens, I don't think there's any such thing as an out of district placement that is less than $40,000 plus transportation.
Wow.
So you
And not
just go click, 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 doesn't matter who you are, let
right.
alone could they handle them.
Right.
Those places aren't, have lots of space in them. They have waiting lists, and it won't be just us. It'll
Right.
be every school system saying, we've got 10 new referrals. Well, 10 and 10 and 10 and 10 and 10 for a specialty school that might have 100 kids in it, that
Mhm.
fills it up pretty darn quick.
Mhm. So
So
are you seeing high levels of anxiety at this point in the children in the school community?
I I don't want to say yay or nay, because I mean, I've gone into classes and the kids seem like they're doing the best they can. Um, it's hard to tell. I think parents certainly know,
Mhm.
much better than I could make a statement about that. I don't think would be fair. But I think our parents are struggling. I think our kids are struggling with that. I mean, you get the older kids, they're now wanting to go get their summer jobs that are
Right.
becoming available. A lot of them were, baggers at Shaw's and, Market Basket all through this thing, because their parents might have been laid off. They needed to go to work. The stores couldn't have some of their older people working, so they were bringing in the young kids. Uh, when I went to Shaw's, I was seeing 3 and 4 and 5 kids in there running cash registers, stocking shelves, middle of the day, if you were there. And it's good on one end, but not good on another, where they should be in school at 7:30. They should be getting out at 2:30. They should be headed off to a tennis match or whatever. And no, they're bagging at Shaw's.
Right.
So their disconnect has got to be huge, whether I can state that or not. It has to be huge for them. I mean, that's the other thing. When we talked earlier, how do you send your soccer team off to play a game in Georgetown when it's 30 kids on the soccer team, and the bus driver says, oh, no, 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 wait a minute. One per seat, every other seat. Put your equipment where? You can't get 3 and 4 buses to take the 30 kids to the soccer match, even if it was going to be allowed to happen with or without fans.
Right.
So things that are a real part of kids' lives, part of what school is about, what they look forward to, are really in question. That has to cause anxiety. It causes anxiety for me, and I'm almost done with school. So what does it do for someone who's a middle school student?
Mm.
It's got to affect them tremendously. And they may not even be able to verbalize it, not even able to say it, or even know who to say it to.
There's so
So,
many unknowns for these kids.
it's that old thing, stuff it, stuff it, stuff it. How much of this are they stuffing?
Mm.
And, when you have stuffing put in you, your seams break sometimes. So if you overstuff something, that's not a good formula. So I'm worried, but I'm hopeful. Our kids are resilient. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's just a huge, huge challenge. And it's not like, it's 9/11 and the horrible event happens and then you recover from it. It's a horrible event that's ongoing and may be here for 18 months, right? Until you get a vaccine or whatever.
Do you see, where are the kids finding any sort of fun or joy or happiness? Are you seeing el- moments of that anywhere?
I saw a Fox News special last night that had Lauren Ryan and her best friend at a graduation softball party. That was awesome, but it's a drive-by. I went to my twin grandkids' first grade birthday party in Hamilton, and it was kind of cool. Everybody lined up down the street and put balloons all over their cars, and you drove by and waved out the window at the twins. And then that was basically it. You threw their gifts out. That's not a way to have a birthday party. I mean, where's the cake smeared all over your face? Where's the game, the running through the hose, all the things you do when you're a kid? It's not there. So
Well,
whether I articulate it or not, that has got to affect those kids at a super important time of their lives. But they are resilient. On the surface, they seem like they're going about their business, but there's no going as a group to the mall, like we would have done, pile into a car and get on the mall, walk around. Nope.
Well, before we run out of time, let's ask about graduation plans.
Yep. I think Amy Rose has done an absolute fabulous job planning graduation. It's sort of a two-phase thing. One is a hope that on August 5th, there'll be a more traditional ceremony, probably outside on the soccer field, if the guidelines allow, with, speakers and all that kind of stuff. On June 5th, which is the day the kids would have graduated, there'll be a drive-by graduation, for lack of a better word, where the kids have time slots. They line up along Jordan's Lane, 2 cars per family. And the car comes up, there's a stage set up. I'm on there, Amy's on there, the board chair's on there. The kid gets out of the vehicle, can come up and get their diploma handed to them at a safe distance. Family can then move down a little further, take a nice photo. The next car comes, but the graduation is scheduled from 11 to 3. So you come in waves, but everyone from A to C report to the lineup at Jordan's Lane at X time. And then the teachers, like 30 or 40 teachers have signed up, will line the sidewalk at 6-foot distance and clap while the kids go by. And the kids will wave, but there's no everybody feeling that fellow classmates, because it's the next car. And you can't have a bunch of cars all around. The police, can't have that going on, rightfully so. They were nice enough to sort of let us do a drive-by. So it's certainly better than a virtual graduate. Kids didn't want a virtual graduation.
Right.
Where you get called up and then I hand you the diploma through the screen. They didn't want that. They wanted something like this. And then we hope we can pull off something that resembles something more like graduation on August 5th. But that's a huge amount of work, for Amy Rose, because everybody had a different idea. Everybody had a theory about, no, you need to do it this way, you need to do it that way. And Amy just persevered through that and put together something that came from her heart, because that's the kind of leader she is. Everything is from her heart. She was their guidance counselor years ago before she became a principal. Started out as a guidance secretary. So, she has a feel for all those kids. They're her kids. And this will be as nice as it can possibly be, but it's not graduation,
Well, I look forward to hearing the honking and the screams at the windows on June 5th. That will be really,
I hope so.
Yeah.
Our kids deserve. Behind us is the senior showcase. This is last year's Shaylin Liu performance. And in the upper, I don't know if it's upper left or right, there's Clara Mazzo who was a choice kid from Gloucester, and she's playing her violin while another kid, I think it's Jace Rowan or somebody, Jace, I don't know what his last name was, but
Oh,
Jace, who wasn't a student then, but he came back to get on stage with Clara.
I
And
love it.
Clara's playing the violin, virtuoso performance, and she's doing a hula hoop at the same time. So she's got the hula hoop coming, and she's playing the violin. It just blow you away.
Yeah.
And kids couldn't have that this year. But one of the most impressive things about Rockport was the senior showcase. Gone. Prom, gone. Graduation, gone. Fall, uncertain. They get into college, right? Well, are they going to college? You know, some of those kids, is their college going to open? Are they paying for dorms, or are they going to do it virtually with all their classes while they're freshmen? Where's their college experience for $40,000 of borrowed money or whatever? You know, I mean, run those numbers for a second, and you run into a real unknown for them. So it's not good, but like we said way back when, it's the cards were dealt. You pick them up, you play them, and Kenny Rogers was right. No one to hold them, no one to fold them. But there certainly is, you know, a train bound to Georgia, and it's dark out at night, and somebody's going to whisper to you, right? And all you can do is play those cards, and no one to hold them, no one to fold them, and hope you get through it.
I think we're going to be lucky if we have cards to play with. I feel
Well,
like
yeah, I mean,
so
the people in 911 and, you know, 9/11 didn't have any cards to play with. Boom, done. People falling out windows. People have died in this horrible thing as well. You know, I mean, it's equally as devastating, but it's like taking that moment and stretching it across a huge amount of time with uncertainty. And, you know, that was horrible, but it was instantaneous. This is horrible, but it's prolonged.
And the uncertainty is just one of the most grievous things about this, particularly for young people. Just one big
So
uncertainty.
that's when we need to support each other. We need to support our kids. People have to be kinder on Facebook. They have to be kinder in stores. They have to be kinder at town meeting. They have to understand we're all in this together. And, you know, for us, our kids are our future. I mean, they're the difference. They're the next generation, you know, and how they come out of this is going to be really, really, really important. So
Thank you so much for talking to us today. And
right.
we look
You guys
forward
do a great job. So keep it up.
Thank you. You too.
All right.
Take care.
Take it easy. All right. See ya.